Talk. Tonight we'll be having a discussion on the role youth can play as the elections are drawn further, and also about the leadership positions and the possibilities of young persons taking more of such roles in the country. We know that in the past, young persons have been in charge, and we want to see how that can happen again in the present and sometime in the future. Tonight I'm joined by my guest, Reverend Sam Oye, the lead pastor and founder of the Transforming Church. He speaks to me now about the prospects of youth leadership. Good evening, Reverend Sam Oye. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you doing, Amadin? Good to see you.
I'm good, sir. Good evening, sir. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Good to see you on this broadcast, and you're looking sharp.
You too, sir. Thank you very much. All right, let's start now with the basics. How can youths, get more into leadership positions? Like I said in my introduction, when we look at history, we'll find that a lot of persons who were in power way back, even our current leaders today, our current president, to use a direct example, his first stint at power, he was a young person. But these days, it doesn't seem the case anymore. How can we start to get youths back at the top levels of leadership?
Well, thank you so very much. It's a very, very important discourse, particularly in this significant moment in our nation's history. This is the moment for us to begin to take leadership education back to our young people. In the Maslow's hierarchy of, human needs and all of that, self-actualization is something that is very critical. And leadership awareness, leadership consciousness was very, very strong in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s. There was some kind of leadership consciousness that was sweeping across Africa. Whether you talk about from Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah, and you talk about Nasser in Egypt, and all across Arab Moi, Kenya, Nelson Mandela, there was a leadership consciousness that swept across Africa in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. After that, what we now began to have among our young people was more about survival. So the consciousness moved away from taking on leadership to surviving. And we now realize in the times that we find ourselves in now, that if I do not focus on leadership and I focus on survival, the likelihood is I may not survive. So everyone is beginning to say, hey, you know what? Maybe now we should begin to focus on leading, and then we will survive, rather than focus on surviving, thinking that will help us to thrive. So I think there was a leadership consciousness amongst those who are current leaders in their time. And then if you notice in the 80s, 70s, 80s, you had things like the Boy Scout, Boys Brigade. These were all leadership development hubs. Young people learned leadership skills from those particular organizations. You were trusted into leadership responsibilities through all those kind of positions. And so I want to say that leadership education, leadership awareness, leadership consciousness is something we must begin to imbibe in our today's young people. And there's no better time to do it than now. And I hope we can talk more about that today. Yes, sir.
All right, that's fair enough. So now, before we talk about the future, let's talk about the present. What needs to change about our current leadership?
If we're talking about the current leadership style that Nigeria has been bedeviled by, it doesn't matter what party comes in. The leadership style is actually what decides the direction of the nation, not a change of party. The leadership style. The personalities will come and go. It is actually the style that decides the direction of the nation. Up till this moment, the leadership style we've had in Nigeria has been more transactional. So it's been more of a leadership of put me there and I will settle you. If you give me power, I will give you this. So it's been more of a transactional kind of leadership style that has bedeviled Nigeria. It doesn't matter what party comes in. If the leadership style remains same, then the country is not moving anywhere. What Nigeria needs now is a combination of servant leadership and transformational leadership. We need a new style of leadership. We need a new leadership operational system. The operational system of leadership that has been used up till now is the reason why we keep getting the same result using different parties. What we actually need to focus on now is which of the parties and persons is bringing on board a new leadership style which has to be transformational, which has to be visionary, and it has to be more of a servant leadership style. Pretty much that is the kind of leadership style we need to see now that will lift Nigeria from a third world country and make Nigeria to become a first world country where our young people can begin to see the maximization of their true potential, because an average young person in Nigeria is a bundle of potential. All we need is an enabling environment fostered, nurtured, and brought into being by a transformational leadership team, not just one individual. Yes, sir.
All right, that's fair enough. So you mentioned that sometimes, or perhaps the leadership model now is a bit transactional, where it's give and take, and also you spoke about how you need a different kind of leadership now. So the question is, how can we get there? Because you spoke about people or young persons wanting to survive rather than thriving and trying to lead. So the question now is, we are a third world country, a developing country. So there is that high tendency for people to want to just survive. We have the NBS said recently that about 130 million Nigerians are living in multi-dimensional poverty, and we have high instances of vote buying. So the question now is, how do you convince a person to let go of simply thinking about their stomach and then leading or following the right leaders?
Thank you so very much. The most amazing thing for us, right, in the history of Nigeria, have we found in ourselves in a place whereby the young people in this country are strategically positioned now to begin to focus more on leadership. It is very true that we have those who are pretty poor amongst us in Nigeria. But I'm happy to let you know that quite a number of our young people now are beginning to find themselves in the income bracket, the middle class, a little bit above the middle class, and the upper class. So what we need, sir, is for the ones who are already employed, those who have means of survival, those who are young entrepreneurs, those who are involved in some kind of business trade, those who are involved in some kind of work or the other, for us to come together and realize that if we will ever see the Nigeria of our dream, wish for it, we have to demand for it. And trust me, the NSAS in Nigeria proved that if our young people can come together, we can galvanize resources the pursuit of the common goal. So what we're saying right now, while so many of our young people at the bottom of the rung or the bottom of the ladder, but quite a number of them will still be talking about survival, we already have a huge number that have already gone beyond the survival bracket. And what they need to start focusing on is leadership. Now, those of them who have left the survival bracket and are well-read school, they have good jobs, those of them doing their own business, it's time for them to know that come together, bring our resources together, and then we will inspire the younger ones who are struggling to survive. You see, it's all about pulling each other up. Those who are a little bit better will pull those who are beneath up. It's a lot of work, but trust me, it is difficult, but not impossible. It's happened before. We've seen the Arab Spring. We've seen this happen across the nations of the earth. We're seeing it happening in South America. We've seen it happen in Kenya. It can happen here. And all we're saying is people like you, Amadin, who is working class, if you begin to think about leadership and someone of your age group also begin to think about leadership, and then we all begin to come together. And because you see, we are all working class, so hunger is not our focus now. How to make Nigeria a better country should become our own focus. So those who are doing better can begin to focus more on leadership and then inspire those who are focused on survival. See how we can inspire them, galvanize them, so that together we can build the Nigeria of our dreams. So what I'm saying is very simple. There are 4 things here. We need to begin to engage our young people who are within the brackets of those who can begin to speak for those who are focused on survival. Engagement. Number 2 is what we call envisioning. We need to start telling our young people that, hey, the people who are your leaders today were in their 30s when they took on the reins of power. How old are you? You are 40, you're 50, and you're pretty much even comfortable than they were. What they did in their time was that they came together. If you go back to Nigerian history, you'll come to realize that they always come together to take on leadership. We can do it. We have the most convenient environment for that to happen. We have what they didn't have. We have technology, we have capacity for communication, and we also have the benefit of financial support coming from diverse sources when it comes to people who truly care about this country. So let's engage, let's enlist, let's envision ourselves, and then let's equip ourselves. It's going to be a serious task, because if you want to get rid of those who have been entrenched in this country, to make sure this country never becomes what it was meant to be, then you know you are in for a very, very serious fight. So we need to make sure we're properly engaged, envisioned, enlisted, and equipped. Trust me, we can make it happen.
That's really encouraging. Especially your analogy, or the way you describe it, as those who are better off helping those who are not doing so well, and getting there together. And I can basically summarize that as be your brother's keeper, which takes me to my next question.
Absolutely.
What is the role of religion in all of this? For anyone aspiring to be a leader, what role would that play in their lives?
Amadin, thank you so very much. My thinking is that I may not be able to speak so very well, but about the other religions in the country. But I can tell you, I grew up in the north. I was born in Kaduna. I schooled in Bauchi and then went to do my university in Ibadan. And I'm back to the north now. So pretty much you will say that I only spent 10 years of my life in the western part of Nigeria. My parents are from the west, but I was nurtured up in the north. So here's what I found. My closest friends were Muslims. Ibrahim, Mohammed, just name that. They were my very close friends. And in growing up in those days, Amadin, it will amaze you to know that when it's time for the Christian fast, My friends will join me, and then we will fast together. And then when it's time for the Muslim fast, we will also do that together. And there's this camaraderie when we all have to go and break the fast together, eat together, and all of that. Now, here's what I really got to learn. You see, the ultimate hallmark of religion is values. The job of religion is to make sure it becomes the crucible, it becomes the place where values are nurtured in the hearts and the lives of the people who practice religion. And when I'm talking about values, I'm talking about integrity, I'm talking about hard work, I'm talking about discipline, I'm talking about brotherly love and the rest of that. So the job of religion is to birth values through the teachings that happens in all of our religious centers, so that the people who come out of our religious centers are value-driven individuals. Now, it is values that puts us together. Every religion talks about love. Every religion talks about credibility, integrity. If our religion will focus on values, we can be united rather than focusing on things that are divisive. And talking about the next generation of leaders, it is very important that those of us who are clergy should begin to realize that above all things, we are to make sure we first live out the values before we even talk about teaching them. Because the reality is that the young people of this generation don't want to hear what you teach. They want to see how you live. So it is our job as the clergy to live out what we teach, so that it reinforces what we tell the young people. We can't tell them not to be corrupt if our practices as clergies is enshrined in corrupt practices. So the onus is on us as religious leaders to become value-driven leaders who birth value-driven followers.
No, that is that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. Now, we'll dive a little bit into another of your areas of expertise as a relationship coach. Now, I'll just make a quick example. Recently, there's a video of the deputy governorship candidates for Lagos for the PDP. I'm talking about the popular actress Funke Akindele. A video of some persons basically mocking her for being unmarried or for being divorced. And this issue, it speaks to how the level of responsibility people place on a person depending on whether they are married or not. So for a young person aspiring for a position or for a leadership position, people often feel as though you are not serious or responsible enough. We even have the president saying recently that at some point he got married because of pressure due to leadership and all that. So the question now is, this concept or conception that people have that single persons, and which is common with the young people, definitely a portion of young people, a great portion of young people are single because they've not really found themselves or found the person they want to spend the rest of their lives with. So that being said, this conception that if you're not married, you don't know what responsibility is, and by so doing, you are shifted away from opportunities and leadership. What do you make of it? Is there any validity to it? Do you have to aspire or get married to be taken seriously?
Thank you so very much. I really find that very amusing, because I think such thinking is, whilst I may not be outright here in terms of trying to condemn such perspective, I find it rather inhuman. I find it insensitive for you to look at someone and your conclusion about the person's unfitness or fitness for leadership position is predicated on the person's marital status. I want to say to you, sir, there is no such thing as when a person is married, the person now has great leadership potential. Some of the most insensitive persons we found sometimes when it comes to leadership are those who are married. So I want to say that whilst marriage is a great thing, and I'm married, and marriage puts a lot of responsibility on you. I'm talking about responsibility to care for your family members. Let me say this. We are missing out by pursuing that model, that paradigm, that perspective. We're missing out on the great potential that we have in young people who are not married. Do you know young people who are not married are doing for corporate organizations? See, they don't engage. They don't have friends to go back home to. They don't have families to care for in terms of wife and all of that. So they have hours to pour into what they are doing. So I think the nation will be missing out greatly if we do not tap into these young people who are unmarried before they even get married. Let's tap into them, get them on board, give them responsibilities. Now, they will give much more than someone who is coming to work and the wife is calling him. She is sick at the hospital. His attention is divided. His son is somewhere. His mother just died. His wife just had a challenge. They just had a stillbirth. And once you become married, your focus becomes divided. You have what you call multiple focus. But for a young man, it's the job. And it's about growing on the job. It's about going to the next level. It's about hitting the next target. I think for me, it is important for us to know, if you read even your holy books, if you read your scriptures, for those of us who appeal to the Holy Bible, you will get to know that people like Paul, decided not to be married. And Paul, of all the apostles in the Holy Bible, you get to discover that Paul, who was not married, did much more than those of the apostles who were married. And Paul actually even said it. He said, look, you know what? If you are going to be married, your attention will be divided by issues that have to do with family. So whilst married people have a lot to bring to the table in terms of experience, it is important to know that those who are unmarried, the young people who are unmarried, have so much to offer our country, so much to offer our enterprises, our organizations, because they have little or nothing to worry about other than that which is their job. So I think we will do a great deal by letting the young people find expression.
All right, thank you very much for doing justice to that. Now, we'll be out of time, so I'll just bundle some questions together. Speaking on the issue of education, Nigeria has one of the highest out-of-school children, number of out-of-school children in the world. I'd like to understand, how much of an impact do you think this will have on the kind of leaders we have, if we have any, due to this high number? And also, do leaders need formal education?
Thank you so very much, sir. Education is very central. Education is very central to the evolution of a leader. I'm going to say that again. Education is very central to the evolution of every leader. It is, however, important to note that such education may not necessarily be within the four walls or from the four walls of a university. We have leaders who did not emerge through the formal educational process. Whilst that is very important, it is by no means the only means by which leaders evolve. We have leaders who did not go through that route and evolve to become amazing leaders. In actual fact, some of the leaders of our time today who are leading some of the most successful businesses were actually dropouts from some of the formal educational system or educational processes. And they had to find other means by which they educated themselves. Whatever the case may be, whether you're formally educated through the normal educational process or you are educated outside the normal educational process, it is very critical that a leader must be educated in some sort. All right, it's very important to have a nation where young people are not educated, schools, they are out of school, and the rest of that. It is not good for the country's future, because we are living in the 21st century. This is a knowledge-driven economy. We're living in a digital era. We are living in a knowledge-driven era whereby research and development drives innovation. And if you go and look at Nigeria, if you look at the Global Innovation Index, you will discover that Nigeria is ranking very low on the Global Innovation Index. Why? Because there's no so much research opportunity for our young people. Many of them who could contribute to research are out of school. So I want to say to you, if we're going to leapfrog, if we're going to be like the Chinas, the Japan, if we're going to be like the Singapores, the Dubai, education is very critical. Whatever kind of education that can be formal, informal education. It can be learning an art, to be going to read the normal school system. But trust me, the world of education offer the next generation of leaders in Nigeria. So I highly recommend whatever kind of education, whether formal or informal, I highly recommend that education should be something that the next generation of leaders must be thrown into.
That is it. All right. We're almost out of time now. So just as quickly as possible, I'd like now your parting words for young ones out there. The elections are just about 23 days away. What do you advise, or what do you predict? How do you want Nigerians, young Nigerians, to look at this opportunity?
Well, you already called it an opportunity, so it's now left for us to take advantage of the opportunity. You know, an elderly man once approached a young man and said to an elderly man and said to him, he said, "Sir, I have a butterfly in my hands." And he said to the young man, he said to the elderly man, he says, "Do you want to tell me if the butterfly is alive or dead?" And the elderly man looked at the young man and he said to him, he said, "Young man, whether the butterfly is dead or alive, it depends on you. Because if I tell you that the butterfly is alive, you can squeeze it. And if I tell you that it is dead, you release it." In essence, whether it will live or die, it is in your hands. I want to throw the same back to our young people in Nigeria. The future of this country is right now in your hand, like that butterfly. If you allow greed to make you squeeze it, you kill this country. But if you say no to greed, you will release the full potential of this country. So I will say to you, don't allow 10 naira, 40 naira, 1,000, 10,000 that a politician will give you today make you squeeze the Nigeria of your dream and take life out of the Nigeria of your dream. I will say to every young person here, refuse, shun, ignore, turn your back against any form of manipulation that will lead you to destroying the future of your country for just a little token. The sacrifice will be worth it. I know it may be very painful to turn your back on that little amount, but trust me, the sacrifice will be worth it ultimately. Vote for people who have proven characters, vote for people with competence, vote for the person that you know has the credibility to take your country to the next level. It's all up to you. Whether the butterfly lives or dies, it's in your hands.
Thank you so much, Reverend Sam Oye. This has been enlightening, and it's been a great pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming, and thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you so very much, sir. It's such an honor and privilege to be with you.
Thank you, sir.